What's up, everyone? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and I just want to get this out of the way real quick. I'm specifically not using Persona 5 footage because I want to keep it kind of. I don't feel like spoiler free is the proper term to use, although this video will be completely spoiler free, but let me see if I can think of a better way to word this. I'm trying to keep it completely away from anything Persona story related. So even though if you're interested in what I have to say about this, the worst comes to worst is if you don't want to see the Outlast 2 footage, you can just minimize it and listen to what I have to say. So, as I mentioned as well, this video will reference one or two specific situations, but I'll give no details on them whatsoever. So it is spoiler free for Persona 5. So if you've not yet got around to playing it, or you're in the process of playing it but maybe haven't got too far or haven't finished it yet, it's still safe to listen to this video because I am keeping it spoiler free. So, what do I want to talk about? Well, first off, I finished Persona 5 earlier today, several hours ago. And I waited, I let stuff digest a little bit, and I just thought about stuff more, and I won't get really into the detail about how the process went, but it made me look back over the previous 100 hours. 103 hours, 2 minutes to be exact, is how long it took me to finish Persona 5. And it made me look back on everything that occurred in Persona 5 and how I felt about everything as it occurred, how it made me feel and my reaction to it. And it made me think back to not so much think back, but it made me realize that when you look at companies, development companies who make these big role-playing games, obviously Final Fantasy, you've got Persona, there's not just the Japanese ones, but you've got other ones that are going to be drawn out and you're going to be centralized among one or two characters for an extended period of time. They don't even have to be role-playing games, mind you. Certain games do it for first-person shooters, certain games do it for first-person shooter series, some do it for once-off games, some do it for third person games, some do it for, there's all types of genres, so it's not just exclusive to role playing games. So it's not so much a trick, but it's a methodology of character development, and I've spoken about this in one of my videos before, forming what I can only call an emotional bond with the characters. And that obviously will enhance your playthrough of the game, because when situations happen, when people say things, when something happens or something doesn't happen that you want to happen, things like that, you're more invested. You're more emotionally invested into it. And I'm not going to compare it to the likes of, say, one of your real life friends for the last however long you've been alive. It's not going to be the same as that, but there's still an actual emotional connection to it, to the point where you're not just thinking about it as, oh, goddamn, it's stupid character or something like that. It's like, oh, finally this happened or whatever. So it's something that's employed in various different ways across many different games. And I've personally found it to have only been effective in several games. There's many, many games out there that will claim and be praised for extremely high quality narratives and character development and character building. If you ask me, there's only a few of them. One of the most extremely overrated ones, which I personally felt had almost zero character emotional involvement bond forming between the characters in the game and me as the player, was BioShock Infinite. Very overrated to that extent. And personally, I gave no interest whatsoever between Booker and Elizabeth, versus how I felt on what was happening and what they were doing. But again, it's not just limited to that. There's other very, very different, other varied and very different genres and series, as well as types of characters that they do it with. Let me use this as a perfect example. I am personally invested in the Gears of War series. I've been there for Gears of War Day 1. Hell, you could even say I've been there from before Day 1, because I played Gears of War 1 about a week before it actually came out. I'm not going to go into the details on how, but my point is there. So I spent a lot of time playing through Gears of War 1 several times within the first, 2-3 years before Gears of War 2. And the way they develop the characters, and they keep a such tight focus on the squad, Delta Squad. So you've got your Marcus Phoenix, you've got your Dominic Santiago, you've got your Damon Baird, and you've got your Augustus Cole. They're your 4 core characters for Gears of War. You are, for the most part, basically stuck with these characters through all 3 games. Everything that happens to one of them happens to all of them. And it's done and developed in such a way that you actually, or I personally find it, that I was actually felt like, not so much that I was part of the squad, but I felt like when something happened to one of them, it happened to me. Or it happened that I was involved with what was happening and going on around me. And there's an excuse to be made for that as well. I mean, it's great storytelling. And you can argue, Gears of War, that doesn't have a story, whatever. The fact of the matter is, they develop the characters in such a way to get you emotionally involved with the characters. Which is, no matter what the case of the game, if a game is bad or a game is good, whatever. But the fact is, they can do something with the story and the characters and the character development to actually get you emotionally invested. That's always a plus. So I'm going to use one more game as an example. One that gets extreme amounts of praise as well. I'm not going to say this one is undeserved, but I don't think it's as highly regarded as it is. But one game that gets this kind of praise for this exact kind of thing is The Last of Us. The Last of Us obviously has the same kind of situation. So you have the story between Joel and Ellie. They basically start off butting heads as adversaries. Hell, straight away when they first meet, Ellie has a knife trying to stab Joel. And that's not a spoiler. It happens like 20 minutes into the game. But anyway, you get my point. The way they do it in these games, it varies because of the style of games, because of the story, the settings, the location, and the genre of games. So let's go back to Persona for a minute. And when you look at it, how they do it, how Persona games work, for the most part, they take place over the course of a year, or the majority of a year. It depends on the game, and there's 1 or 2 slight variations and slight exceptions. But for the most part, a Persona game is generally considered to take place over the course of a year. And I feel like the way they've done it in Persona 5, as well as Persona 4, a game that I have extreme involvement with, both on not just both on every level, but on every type of level, both quality of gameplay, quality of story, emotional involvement with the characters, all of that is there in 4, P4G, definitely. And the way they do it in Persona 5, as well as Persona 4, I should say, is that it essentially makes you live out a normal life to an extent. Obviously, there's a whole Phantom Thieves aspect and a whole TV world aspect, depending on which Persona game you're playing. But for the most part, you are forced into these situations where you would, if you were to do them in real life and put them in, if you were put into these situations in real life, you would essentially most likely become friends with a person and get closer to the person, develop a bond with the person, and God knows what might happen. So the way I think it's very effective in the Persona aspect of it is it makes you do those minuscule things, those small minor things, but those are the things that are actual core to developing a bond with someone, to developing friendship with someone. I mean, at the end of the day, when you think about real life, how do you become friends with someone? Exactly. There's no specific solid answer. There's an old saying as well about how people become friends when they're kids or when they're young. I don't remember the saying 100%, so I may get 1 or 2 words wrong or out of order in here. But it's something like, when they were younger, they spent a whole lot of time doing nothing together. Something along the lines of that. It's the same kind of system that they use in Persona, if you ask me, and I think that's extremely effective. They also have, obviously, there's other parts. There's being put in what I can only call, I won't say, well, life threatening is a point of the Persona ones as well, but you get these large pivotal situations where if you were placed in a similar situation in real life, it would be almost an awakening or turning point or a realization point in real life. And they put you in these positions with people that you have developed or currently in developing bonds with in these situations. It's going to make you become closer, and it's going to, in a sense, because you are designed to be the protagonist and the main character of Persona 5, he's basically your avatar, and you are deciding his actions and what he does, which can be said for many games, but oh hell, it can be said for almost all games, if not all games. But it's a projection of yourself, and that's what it's designed to be. And that's another tool exceptionally used and expertly used in these situations to actually help develop the bond and help cement it even further. And there were points in this game, I won't, like I said, no spoilers or anything. So there were points in this game where something would happen, and then, a certain person would walk in or out of a room, or a certain person would say something, and the reaction you would get from the people would bring like a smile to your face, or it would make me say something out loud, like "damn it" or "damn you, whoever," or it's like "yes, thank God, whoever," or something along those lines. So the fact is that I'm not just thinking it, but it's taking a physical manifestation in my face or my hands or my actions, as well as I'm actually saying it out loud, which is extremely rare. When I'm sure most people know that saying something out loud or laughing out loud by yourself is usually a pretty rare situation, and that's generally how funny or effective or involved and important these things are to yourself. So I think that's the fact that the game can make me do that is extremely effective storytelling, and it's extremely quality in the aspect of character development and forming the bonds with the characters, because you don't even realize it. It's not like at the start they're going to say, we are going to make you be friends with these characters and care what they do and what happens to them and what you do and what doesn't happen to them. So it's not like it sets out that way. It just happens subtly, progressively, and more importantly, naturally, like it would in real life. And because of that, when something good happens, it's a giant surge, it's a boost, it's a rush, it's a psych. But when something bad happens, it's a real complete downer. It's an actual gut check. It's a punch in the stomach. Your heart drops, your jaw drops, what's that feeling they call when you get in your chest and it just sinks? That. When good things happen, it's great. When bad things happen, you feel it. And it is when a story can effectively do that, you know it's quality, if you ask me. And like I said, there's very few games that have actually done this. For example, I could not give a crap about what happens to anyone or anything in Final Fantasy 15. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, but I can't remember the last time I played a Final Fantasy game where I actually cared about the people and characters in it and what happened. I think maybe Final Fantasy X was the last one that actually happened, and even then it was to the point where it was, so I'm so unsure of it that it obviously wasn't that impactful. The only few that stick out in my mind are obviously the Gears of War series, which the characters who, despite it being a meathead shooter for the most part, the characters and main characters are actually pretty deep, and the story weaved between all the characters and their struggles is actually surprisingly compelling. But we have that. We have, obviously, The Last of Us, which I agree with for the majority, and Persona 4 Golden. So, off the top of my head, in the last, let's call it 10 years, it's basically 11, because whenever Gears of War 1 came out, 2006, but I can only think of 4 games, or at least if you count all the Gears series as one, I can only think of 4 things which have actually succeeded in doing that. So you've got the Gears of War series, Persona 4 Golden, The Last of Us, and Persona 5. And the reason why I'm not counting Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 as one thing is they're completely unrelated, with completely separate characters and nothing to do with each other, unlike the Gears of War series. So it really goes to show. And here's a perfect example, which I've actually mentioned in one or two of my previous videos as well, is that Persona 4 Golden is the first game I played. Would it be correct in saying the first game I played? It would be... no, that would not be, but it wouldn't be the best way to describe it. I'm going to use a different term, a different way of describing it now. When I finished Persona 4 Golden, I unfortunately got the bad ending. And I had to live with that, basically. And because of how the entire game had progressed and my choices that I made and the bonds that I formed and the emotional investment I put in certain places in games from myself, not just the character, when I got the bad ending in that game, I was legitimately down for a week. It was ridiculous. I didn't want to get out of bed nearly sometimes, and I was just kind of like in a sad drone haze for a while. I remember I finished that game in the middle of the night, Persona 4 Golden, and I was on a weird sleeping schedule at that time, so I was getting up at like 11 p.m. or something. But I finished it at like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 in the morning. I can't remember what time it was. But a few hours later, at maybe like 8 o'clock in the morning, my friend picked me up because we were going to the gym. And I got into his car, and he looked at me and he just said, "Jesus, Q, what the fuck is wrong with you? You look like you've been hit by a bus or something." I was visibly, this was per his words, whatever situation I was in, mentally and emotionally because of that game, and the ending I got because of the involvement I had in it, and the investment I had in it, it was manifesting in a physical way that I actually looked down. So that's how you know, if you ask me, there's a quality story there. And Persona 5 definitely achieves that. There's so many times where something happened and I could think of myself, and if I didn't actually say it, I did some sort of expression, be it with my face or my hands or whatever, or I'd actively think about it in my head. And the majority of the time, in Persona 5's case, it either came out of my mouth or it showed in some physical way, be it my face or my hands or whatever it was, more often than not, than it did in my head. So that's why I cannot recommend this game enough. If you like role-playing games, specifically JRPGs or Atlas games or Persona games in general, I cannot recommend this game enough. Absolutely. Definitely worth the time. My Take Your Heart Premium Edition will live on in a special place in my heart that it will take, pun intended, forever with Persona 4 Golden. And I urge all you people to play this game. If it's the kind of thing you're after, or if you're after a very narrative-focused and strong story-based game, definitely give Persona 5 a try. So that's where I'm going to leave it there, because, wow, 18, nearly 19 minutes at this point. So, have you played Persona 5? What is your opinion on Persona 5? Have you formed any bonds like this with characters in any other games and series that you've emotionally been invested in? And has it been a better or worse experience because of it? Even if it was a game you didn't enjoy as much, or a game you loved, just because of the investment. And what do you think of the tools that developers use to make this effect on us, and how that, because they know it's going to make their story more involving and more engaging and more impactful on us? So let me know all of that in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you want. Hit the subscribe button if you want. I don't know why I said that differently this time. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, which I already said, and I will see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.